Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Pond Bassmaster. Today I'm going to be talking about how to fish rocks. Alright guys, so before I start talking about how to fish rocks, I want to explain to you guys a study I found online. Basically, a group of researchers took 7 bass minnows, put them in a bucket with nothing in it, just water. And the fish, or the minnows, were scattered around the bucket, not conjugating to anything. They were just in the bucket. Then they put a small piece of, I think, wood or plastic over half of the bucket. And all the bass stayed in the shade. None of them were out on the light side. They were all in the shade of the bucket. And then they took off the shade and they threw in 5 rocks, all in the same pile. And then the minnows conjugated to the rocks. So that's kind of why bass conjugate to structure. So now I'm going to talk about how to fish the rocks. Alright guys, so probably the best rock fishing lure is a crankbait. So I'm going to go in depth on fishing different kinds of crankbaits in the rocks. And then I'm going to briefly talk about a few other lures that also produce fish really well in the rocks. Alright guys, so when you're fishing shallow rocks, the best lure or the best crankbait is a square bill crankbait. I really like the Xcite Baits XB1s. For the price, you can't beat them. They come with really good hooks. I believe they're Gamakatsu, and they're just overall really good square bills. When you're fishing rocks 2 to 5 feet, you better be throwing a square bill because the way the bill is shaped, I'm sure you've all seen a square bill before, but if you haven't, I'll put a picture of a square bill, probably either up here or over here. And basically that bill helps it deflect off cover easier. So it's really good for fishing shallow rock because it deflects off cover and it's a shallow diving crankbait. So square bills are really good. I really like the Xcite Baits XB1s. And then also a Rapala DT4 is another really good shallow diving lure. It is not a square bill, but it is another really good shallow rock fishing crankbait. So next up, we have the medium water depth crankbait, and this is basically 6 to 11, 6 to 12 feet is my kind of general rule of thumb. So I have 2 of my favorite medium diving crankbaits here. The Sebel Bull Crank I really like because of its really small profile. It's only a 2-inch bait, but this thing can dig down to 12 feet. So I really like the Sebel Bull Crank. It's also in the Action First series, so it's only about $8. It's silent and it's a really good medium diving crankbait, especially for the rocks. And then also the Berkley Flicker Shad is also a really good one. The only issue I've had with these is not all of them run straight, but these 2 have a very different action. Let me show you guys the bellies here. Not sure how well you guys can see that. But this one, the Flicker Shad, is much thinner than the Bull Crank, which is much fatter, I guess you could say. But what that's going to do is you're going to want to fish this one in colder water because it's going to have a tighter action. And you're going to want to fish this one in warmer water because it has a much larger swing to it because of its body shape. So when you're fishing a medium depth crankbait, you're going to want to be fishing it when the bottom is 12 feet. The key to crankbait fishing, especially in the rocks, is maintaining contact with the bottom. So those are some medium diving crankbaits that you can use when you're fishing medium depth water with rocks. Alright, so when you're fishing really deep water, 12 feet plus, I really like a Strike King 5, 6, 8XD crankbaits. They are probably, for the money, the best deep diving crankbait. This is a sexy shad color. This is probably the best beginner deep diving crankbait. And like I said, a lot of these techniques are going to be used in ponds. So you're like, when would I ever throw anything bigger than a 5XD in a pond? I usually don't. A 5XD is about as big as I'll go for a pond. But it's always nice to have 1 or 2 of these in your tackle box. Because there are some ponds out there. I fish a couple ponds that are actually used to be quarries, so they're really, really deep in some parts. So having this in your tackle box definitely helps sometimes. But when you're going to be fishing with this, similar to the medium diving crankbaits, you're going to be fishing for big fish, and you're going to be you're going to be trying to keep in contact with the bottom, bouncing it off rocks. And you'll notice this bill is really big. I believe this dives to 17 or 18 feet. But my general rule of thumb is if you're fishing a crankbait that goes down to 12 feet, the rocks or the bottom should be at 10 or 11 feet. So that way it's digging into the dirt. And the reason, I'm sorry, I haven't explained this yet. If you guys don't know, they're like, why would you want to keep in contact with the bottom? Aren't you going to get snagged? Well, if you're not getting snagged, you're not going to be catching fish because that's where the fish are. But basically, when you hit a rock, what the crankbait does is it's going to deflect off and it's going to float up a little bit. And basically, what a bass does is they'll sit in a small spot and they're, just looking back and forth, and this thing comes flying by. They're going to take a quick glance at it. It hits that rock, bounces off really fast, and bass opportunistic feeders. So that basically means if they see something, they're going to react to it and bite it because, like I said, they're opportunistic feeders. And causing a really quick reaction bite like that is key. So that's why you want to keep in contact with the bottom. Those are my general rule of thumb for crankbaits. Now let's briefly talk about some of the other lures that also produce well in rocky waters. Alright guys, so now I'm going to briefly talk about some lures, specifically 3 lures that produce really well in rocky waters outside of crankbaits. So the first one is a football head jig. I have so much confidence in jigs, from flipping jigs to swim jigs to football head jigs. And a football head jig is what you want to be throwing in rocky water, and specifically just throwing it right into rocks because the way the head shape is, it comes through rocks extremely easy, bounces over top of them, and it prevents you from getting hung up inside rocks or like getting caught in between cracks in the rocks. So a football head jig is a really good one. I like the Excite Baits Reflex football jig. It's a really detailed jig. Comes with a trailer. It's a really nice jig. But, this is not a search bait. When I'm going to be fishing this, I'm going to be slowly hopping it along the bottom back to me. And I'm usually going to be previously throwing something like a square bill. So I'm just burning the banks with a square bill, right? And I catch 1 to 2, 3 fish. Then I'm going to, take out my jig rod, toss this bad boy, and I'm probably going to catch some bigger fish. So I'll give you guys an instance that happens in a lot of ponds around me. So I'm fishing this pond. I'm burning the banks with a square bill. Boom, boom, boom. I catch 3 dinks. Throw in the football jig after them. I'm usually going to catch a solid keeper fish. And that's why I really like a football head jig. But once again, it's not a search bait. It's a bait that you're going to use to key in on fish. The next one is just a versatile bait. A chatterbait. You can throw it in rocks. You can throw it in grass. You can throw it in open water. You can throw this thing everywhere. But again, I'm going to be fishing this thing like a search bait. I really like throwing a chatterbait because I have confidence in a chatterbait. But basically what I'm saying here is if you have confidence in a lure, throw it. I prefer a square bill in rocky water, but I have a lot of confidence in a chatterbait. And chatterbaits do work really well in all kinds of water. So a chatterbait is a really good search bait in rocky water. And then the last one is just your basic Texas rig with any kind of soft plastic on it. I prefer a beaver or a craw or a creature bait or a lizard. Those are my favorite, and what I'll do is I'll keep the weight unpegged because I'm usually fishing around rocks and I don't want that weight, or I don't want to peg it because what happens is if you hook a fish and the weight's pegged, it's giving that fish more leverage when it, makes its head shakes and stuff, and it has a better chance of becoming unhooked. So I really like to keep it unpegged unless I'm fishing in really heavy cover, and chances are the rocks you're fishing, especially in pond, is just small gravel or small rocks that you're not really gonna, have to worry about pulling a bullet weight out of. So I really like unpegging my weights or leaving them unpegged when I'm fishing a Texas rig. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Love seeing your guys' support, really helps me out. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already. By the way, I also am going to be coming out with some apparel. It's in the works right now, but I'll let you guys know when that stuff will be out for you guys to buy. Once again, guys, peace out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.